Hello and welcome to Data Driven, the podcast where we explore the emerging field of data science. We bring the best minds in data, software engineering, machine learning and artificial intelligence. Now here are your hosts, Frank Lavinia and Andy Leonard.
Hello and welcome back to Data Driven, the podcast where we explore the emerging fields of data science, machine learning, and artificial intelligence. If you like to think of data as the new oil, then you could consider us like Car Talk, where we focus on where the rubber meets the virtual road. And with me on this epic road trip down the information superhighway, as always, is Andy Leonard. How you doing, Andy?
I'm doing pretty good, Frank. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm doing good. I had interesting talk yesterday, and we're recording this on August 2nd. It'll probably go out the following week. Where I gave a presentation to a bunch of high school students from around the world who attend like a summer program at Georgetown.
Very cool.
Yeah, it was interesting stuff for sure. And it was a bunch of kids came up to me for advice and stuff. And I was like, wow, I'm a role model now.
That's cool.
Didn't see that coming.
Well, you've been a role model to me before, Frank. So for a while.
Oh, thanks, man. Thank you.
Yeah.
So today's show, we're going to do something a little different. Wait a minute. I should probably ask you what's up with you.
No. It's okay. It's all good. We should skip what's up with me.
Oh, yeah. We'll save that for another show.
That's okay. Let's go do something different.
All right. So we've been online or on the air. I don't know how to phrase that for podcasts, but we've been doing this for now, about 14 months? We've been live?
Yes.
And 138 shows, somewhere abouts.
Wow.
61,000 downloads.
Nice.
But I'm super excited today. And do you know why I'm super excited?
Why are you super excited today, Frank?
We've got a bunch of listener mail.
What?
Yup.
Listeners have not only listened 61,000 times, apparently, which, I need to tell Mom thanks for listening. No, I'm kidding.
Maybe it was a Russian bot, Andy.
It could be. Don't get me started. More later. So not only that, but there's some people have taken the time to actually communicate with us.
Right.
That's awesome.
They've written to us before and stuff, and but they asked some very kind of pointed questions that are kind of, I think on everybody's mind, and I think we both kind of thought, this would be a good show.
Yeah.
To address this. Originally, I was going to do it as a data point, but then the way Facebook pages work is that if you're signed up as an admin and I'm signed up as an admin, so we can kind of both communicate.
Yep.
And it's like a shared mailbox. So then you answered them, and I was like, maybe it's something, because I'd like to get your opinion too.
Well, sure. And yeah, that's and Facebook pages have changed recently too.
Yeah, they keep Zuckerberg's model is move fast and break things. Which I don't know if that's a good idea anymore. When you're in startup mode, I think it's a good model to have, with an asterisk to it, because breaking things should not be your goal. Improving things should be your goal.
Well, things are going to fail, and failing
things are going to fail.
Right.
Right.
I get it. I mostly support it.
Right. Yeah, I'm kind of on the fence about that. It's kind of like the philosophy of fail fast. It's like,
Yeah, I hear you.
I've seen it misused and abused, and I'm not going to say where.
That is true. That is true. And the places I've seen it not work well is where they say the words fail fast.
Right.
But yet you're punished for failing.
Yeah, which is kind of defeats the purpose. It's just kind of like somebody saw something or read a book and was like, oh, let's do this, and then didn't explain it to their underlings, who then just had a field day with it.
Could be. Yeah, could be. But I get it. And I think you made a good call. I think it's a broader topic than the typical data point. Although you did a data point a couple of weeks ago, the Facebook part of it ran probably 20 minutes, maybe more.
Oh yeah, that was a good one. That was
It
that was
really
our
was
best
good.
data point yet.
Yeah, that was a fantastic data point. So I don't know. I think this is going to go longer than that, though.
Yeah, it probably will. And I
Yeah.
think the other thing I did why I went 20 minutes is because if I see people uh, on the live stream, I'll just kind of do an impromptu Q&A if they're interested.
Yeah.
And that's actually where our first question came from.
Cool.
A gentleman named Avinash. And I believe he's based in India based on, he said, hey, I know it's late. And it was, yeah, but he said it's morning here. So based on that alone, I'm assuming that he's in India. Also, his Facebook avatar has the Indian flag colors.
Well, both, both good clues.
Both good clues. Could be wrong, but in data science, you don't have to be right. You just have to be mostly right. And I think that deserves one of those. All right. So
great.
here's his question.
Here's Avinash's question.
Avinash's question. There's more to it, and his prose is actually pretty good, but I don't want to. I think basically his question is pointing out that Microsoft has two. Hold on, let me restart that. So his question basically boils down to Microsoft has two kind of certification tracks, right?
Right.
There's the traditional MCP ones, and now the new EdX classes.
Right, the professional program, Microsoft.
The professional program, right.
Right.
And he asked a bunch of questions on Quora and stuff like that, and it's really it's an interesting question because I think I've bumped into this too. I actually found it quite annoying because when I did work at a Microsoft partner earlier this year, in order to get certain perks inside the partner programs, you have to have X number of employees certified in something.
Right.
So if you want to be, a certified AI solution provider, we needed to have so many people with, data and AI tests, that pass those tests.
Right. So the old or legacy certifications.
The old legacy certifications, where you have to go to a testing center and you sit there and, they basically put all your stuff in a locker and it feels like you're going to an airport or something like that. And then you go into a room and you're in front of the computer and it asks you questions. Right. That's, I'm sure there's a better name for it, but the traditional certification program.
Yes.
And those tests tend to cost like $300.
Yep.
And you have to be near a testing center.
Yes.
Right. The other ones, kind of the new wave, the MOOC style, but massively online open courseware type program is typically are free to take the class, but you have to pay for a certification. And in fact, with edX, it's pretty much that's how they roll.
Right.
So every course available on edX.org. edX.org is a nonprofit that Microsoft is partnered with to deliver a series of courseware.
Right.
Particularly in the data science. And when I started, they only had the one track. Now I think there's about 5 or 6.
Okay.
There's obviously the data scientist one, which is how this whole movie got started. Then there's the big data engineering one, which you and I did together.
Yep. Then
there's the AI engineer one that I am 90% done with, but because of some big projects Andy and I have cooking, I wasn't able to meet the deadline. Although I did have a valiant 11th hour try, but did not work out. But I'm not discouraged. Sorry, what?
That's okay. I was just going to interrupt there and say this should be an indication to our listeners. So Frank does most of the work. And when I say most, I mean like 99% of the work. I show up and look pretty, which if you've ever seen me. So anyway.
You woke up that way, right? Is that
I don't do that well. But I do. Frank does most of the work. I'm not making that part up. He's engaged doing this and he's doing all of the work. So, Frank should get most of the credit.
Well, thank you. So our listeners should also know, given my history of being intense about these certifications and self-learning, that the size and scope of the projects we have planned And plus, being out in Vegas for a week kind of derailed me by a certain amount of time. Now, that's not an excuse, um, you know, but it just is what it is. And
Well, Frank,
I could take it again in October.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, you'll get it.
I'll get it. I mean, it was just, it's just, even I slip up, so, but I mean, I, of course, being the stats nerd that I am now, I figured out that this is the first time I missed a deadline for edX.
Wow.
Which after like 35, 33 courses is about just under 3%.
Yep.
So 97% success rate. Not
We'll
too shabby.
take that.
But now with that sidetrack over, but I guess it's not really a sidetrack. It's about edX.
Yep.
So basically, his question is, which should I pursue? And I'll just kind of spit out my opinion and thoughts on this. The advantage to the traditional program is that people know it. Right. It's something that people understand, and they know kind of how that works. The disadvantage is, and I think this is why Microsoft really put a lot of weight behind something like edX, is there's a couple of problems with the traditional certification program. One, the cost, right? And two, you have to be near a testing center. Now, if you live in the US, that's not really a big problem for most of us. But I suspect that given Satya's repeated use of the phrase, we want to empower every person on the planet to achieve more, I think the goal was to embrace these online courseware that could be done remotely.
Right.
And at a much cheaper cost. I mean, $99 is still, in some parts of the world, a lot of money. It was a lot of money when I was growing up.
Yeah, well, I don't want to burst your bubble, Frank, but that's not chicken change here. I should say that different. That's not chump change in Farmville.
Oh yeah, good point. I know in San Francisco, that's like what, an Uber ride and a couple of lattes. But
things
but
are pricey in San Francisco. Goodness,
it is pricey in San Francisco.
I could not live there.
In DC, it's still a lot of money. But when in the context of when I was laid off, I looked at the other options at the time. Now this was 2016. Basically, there was a Maryland-based private university. They wanted $15,000, and for their data science certification program, very well established.
Right.
A prestigious engineering school in Massachusetts, which you can probably figure out who I'm talking about, wanted $45,000.
Wow.
So in the context of, at the time, especially because edX classes used to be $49.
I was just about to say, yeah, back then they were $49.
So, 49 times 10, I'll let you folks do the math, compared to $15,000 is a bargain. Even now at the $99, right? So it's about $1,000 to do an entire track.
Right.
Because the data science, AI, and ML one both have 10 courses you have to take.
Right.
The DevOps one and the web dev one are slightly bigger or smaller, I forget. But I mean, you're talking about that scale, right? I mean, at most we're talking about $1,300.
Right.
Which makes it a lot more approachable, makes it a lot more understandable. Particularly for folks who live in parts of the world where, it's not quite as expensive as DC, San Francisco, or even Farmville. You just need to have internet connection, which is kind of another rant I'll go on another day. But the point of it, though, I think the thing that really kind of chapped my I don't want to say that word, but the thing that kind of ticked me off was earlier this year. I think as of January, I think I had like 29 or 27 certifications. Right. But in order for my previous employer to get credit to be an AI partner, which they did get, I had to go to a testing center and do it, despite the fact I had 27 certifications that were related and all relevant.
Yeah. No, I totally get that, because I'm in the same boat. I own and operate enterprise data and analytics. We are a Microsoft partner, and we're trying to climb up the food chain, both in the data sphere and also in data science. And we're facing the same thing. And I have a certification now, a Microsoft Professional Program certification in big data. You do too. You and I did the
Mhm.
capstone together back in April,
Yep.
which I thoroughly enjoyed. And it doesn't count. It doesn't make the list of things that count towards me or enterprise data and analytics becoming a gold partner at Microsoft, and that has implications. I mean, it just does. It defines a lot of the relationship, um, mostly on Microsoft side of the house. What people in Microsoft sales can, how they can interact with me. It just there's a pecking order,
Right.
and I'm at the bottom of that list almost. I'm not quite at the bottom, but yeah, you know what I'm saying. I mean, there's gold and there's silver. I'm not at the 10 level, but I'm not a precious metal by any stretch.
Of
And
course, as the Microsoft employee here, I have to point out that Andy's comments not reflect those of my employer, as well as we do cherish each and every one of our partners. Um, how was that?
well, there's not. So I should clarify. There's benefits to being a Microsoft partner. Don't get me wrong,
Oh yeah,
and it's something that I want for the company. I mean, there's benefits I think all around, especially for a small boutique like Enterprise Data and Analytics. That's one of the reasons why, I want everything that I do to uh, that I think should result in counting towards that to count towards it. If that sentence makes sense, it's the same sort of thing. The company you were working with before, Frank, before you were with Microsoft, they are also a smaller
right.
boutique type consulting firm, and they were trying to do the same thing that I'm trying to do, probably for the same reasons. And and I totally get it.
Oh,
Um,
definitely for the same reasons, and I'm not mad at them. I just
yeah,
always thought it was kind of
I'm not mad at them. I'm
yeah,
I'm not upset with Microsoft about it. The deal is, they it's their program. They make the rules. They've got every right to do that. I totally respect it. I promise, I'm not complaining. I'm just looking at it kind of like this, and I think this is similar to what you said earlier. Um, I think Microsoft is striving, and I think Satya's behind this, is striving to make this very democratic, to make it so people all over the world who don't own a car, who
right.
can't get in a car and drive to a testing center, and the testing center may be days away instead of, like, for me it's a couple of hours.
Or just not in their country.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
I mean that's entire. I mean, remember the world is the world,
yes, yeah, oh
and
yes,
having kind of a satellite uplink, which you could theoretically get anywhere, although there are costs associated with that.
right.
But I mean, I think this makes it accessible to a larger crowd.
It definitely
But
does. I mean, so the education part of this, just making the knowledge democratic, that I think has been achieved through organizations like edX. edX isn't the only one. Frank, heck, YouTube.
right,
You can,
Coursera is
you,
another one.
yeah, you can get an education for free on YouTube. I mean,
Right.
there's a lot of colleges out there that are putting material online for free in these spaces, even in data science and the like. So as far as gaining the information, I think that goal has been achieved, and I applaud that. Um, but I do understand, because I've experienced it and you've experienced it, that I think, and I'll say it this way: I believe Microsoft is going to update the criteria for for their partner program.
Yeah.
Um, but think about this side of it. Suppose you've checked the boxes. What if you're one of those companies that's made it to a gold status, say in AI, and and Microsoft throws the door open and says, well, all you have to do is pass this 10 course thing that you can do remotely in 1 quarter.
Right.
That, if I'm holding if I'm kind of holding that, that access basically, that level of relationship with Microsoft at that point, I don't know that that'd make me happy.
Yeah, I don't know how that. I see what you mean, but I think the purpose is, and so there's two questions. There's really two questions that Avinash asked. One was kind of like, why are there two certification paths, and the other was, which one should he do?
Yeah,
I think we kind of answered the first part of that question.
we
Of
did.
That's why there's two, right? One is kind of an established thing that's been going on since at least the '90s.
Yep.
And there's a whole industry around training for that.
Yep.
And then the other one is one that's been around for 2 years, basically.
Right.
Although MOOCs arguably have been around a little longer, but I mean, effectively in the Microsoft certification space, it's only been around about 2 years.
Right. Right.
Actually, not even. I think they opened the plan to the public in November of 2016.
And I'm trying to remember. I want to say when I searched, and if you hear typing in the background, this is me typing. I searched for Microsoft Professional Program, and I came up with academy.microsoft.com.
That's where it is, yeah. Which
Is
is
that
part of
it?
another training, academy.microsoft.com, I think /dashboard or something like that.
It's I thought I ran into two different. Oh, I know what it was. I searched for Microsoft Academy. That's what it was, because I could remember it was Microsoft Academy. But what it took me to was confusing. It was MVA, Microsoft Virtual Academy.
Oh, yeah. Which is most of the content on MVA you don't get certified for, kind of in the traditional sense, but there's a lot of good stuff on there.
Yeah, no, I'm not knocking that. It's just I was looking for my data science. I think at the time I'd made some progress in the data science curriculum, and I was trying to find that dashboard that told me how many I'd finished and how many I needed.
Right.
And I went to the MBA site, and I was like, "Where is that?" And I couldn't find it, and I was confused because both of them had Microsoft Academy in their name.
Yeah.
It's not MVA. Mike Victor Alpha for you former military people. It was that's Microsoft Virtual Academy. The Microsoft Professional Program, however, is under academy.microsoft.com, and that's why I got confused.
Right, so, just to confuse you.
No, well, it wasn't just to confuse me, but it worked. I'm easily confused. But I'll say, getting back to Avinash's second question, which one should he choose? You and I both replied to him on this,
right?
And my reply was along the lines of, what is it? What's the problem you're trying to solve? Are you just trying to learn the information, or are you in this for some sort of, I don't know, some, like a notch on your resume or something like that? And really, both are good for both of those. The truth is,
right.
I've done both. I was a Microsoft Certified Solutions Developer back before .NET, back when the years began with a 1, Frank.
Whoa.
I was an MCSD, and it was different back then. I mean, that certification wasn't one that lent itself to paper certs. There was another I won't mention that, you could go to a boot camp for a week or two and pay 10 grand, and they guaranteed you would pass the test.
Oh, that was a whole industry.
It was, and it was.
I mean, it wasn't just one company or one company that the certification. I mean, there was this like, there was. I mean, it was a. You could throw a stick, and at least when I lived in New York and New Jersey, it was like you could throw a stick, you'd find an ad for it.
Right. And it was what it ended up doing. I mean, effectively for that particular designation, it eventually eroded confidence in the market in that certification. You didn't know when you saw that on a resume, am I getting somebody who actually knows what they're doing, or am I getting somebody who had $10,000 in 2 weeks? And that's different. Right. Those are two extremes, mind you, of that. And it was rare that you had someone that fell into that second category. In my opinion, it was much more rare than, but the certification suffered as a result of that. So
Well, it also had a black eye for a while, where certification at least was not really seen as a critical thing.
yeah,
At
yep,
least in my experience.
yeah, mine too.
But I think what's interesting though is a lot of thought goes into the exams, the traditional exams where you go in front of a computer and you sit through.
Oh, I've
And
written questions for those, Frank.
so a lot
I
of work
know.
goes into that, and I'm not
It's
saying not a
crazy.
lot of work goes into the edX ones,
Yeah,
but the way the edX ones are structured is that they're much more modular.
yeah.
In fact, you actually see this with the Power BI edX class,
Uh-huh.
where they can update the content because Power BI moves so damn fast, which is a good thing. But
Yeah.
like you actually see where they've inserted modules and they've removed stuff.
Uh-huh.
And that's why the edX courses go from quarter to quarter, because they update them quarterly.
Right.
So
Right.
updating one of those traditional tests is a much bigger process.
It
So
is.
I also think the other advantage, at least from Microsoft's point of view, is they can be a lot more agile,
Yep.
particularly in a field like data science and AI, where things are moving fast.
Well, you picked the perfect example. I
Right.
mean, Power BI there's a new release every month. As far as I know, they've hit that. I think they may have skipped a couple of months in the last couple of years, but they've had just release. And not only are they doing general availability release of features and new stuff, they're adding experimental features, and some of those they show up this month, and next month they're gone. you know,
Right. Well,
and
the other thing is that the service is updated. I think you've told me as many as several times a week at some times,
I have seen it change. I have seen things change in the cloud.
and you weren't just being forgetful.
Well, I, Frank, since we recorded last, I had a birthday, and I am no longer a junior citizen. So
Oh, yeah, but you get like discounts and stuff now.
I've heard that, but I haven't exercised it yet. I think part
Oh,
of it is me trying to. It's like a way for me to hold on to my youth. It's like denying I'm a senior citizen now.
there you go.
I don't know. What does that mean anymore? I'm 55 years old. I mean, I don't know. We talked about this
Hmm.
offline. When I was a kid, when you were a kid, 55, man, people were in wheelchairs, they were in walkers, they were in
Right.
nursing homes. And it's like, I'm not trying to brag, I promise. But 5 years ago, Frank, I ran a half marathon. Okay.
There you go, man. There you go.
I think it's different for the most part. Now, granted, I still know people, who are younger than 55 who suffer from health issues, from age related health stuff. I get that. But I think we've learned a whole slew of like dumb little things that, like don't drink soda, uh,
Right.
get plenty of rest, eat good food, lose
Right.
weight if you're overweight.
Vitamins.
Vitamins, yes.
Yeah.
It's, we just do about, and I mean, it's the inverse of 100 paper cuts, right? It's,
Right.
it's a little dumb things. Take it, low dose aspirin,
Right.
stuff like that. Anyway, I
Well,
think
my
that,
mom's in her 70s and she's bouncing around. She
yeah.
probably does need to live in a more controlled environment. She refuses to,
Oh,
but
wow.
that's a whole other show. But I
We
mean,
need, we need to have a rant show. I can feel it
I know we
coming.
need to have like a second show. It's almost like I'm dropping a hint there. Um, but no, but I mean, age is really, I think, changed dramatically.
It has.
But now we're
I
on
agree.
another sidetrack, which
I know. But so to get back to Avinash's question, I think the answer is it depends on, it depends is, the classic answer, right?
right. Are we still talking about aging with the
Well,
pens?
no, I've jumped back over the 3 tracks back to Avinash. Thanks. It does. Well, that depends too. I just got that. That was me.
Oh, really?
That long. It's probably because I'm so old.
Oh, maybe.
Yeah. Darn you, Frank Lavinia. Darn you. That's it. That's the paybacks, brother. Paybacks are coming. I'm making a note.
I didn't mean it that way. It was just like you said, depends.
No, I get it.
Like,
Serious
wait a minute.
Injury. Frank Lavinia, serious injury. August 2nd, 2018. Yeah. It's in the book.
Just make sure you store the book with ClearDB and they'll erase the book.
Ouch.
But anyway,
Avinash, back to
Avinash.
Avinash's question. Yeah,
Poor Avinash.
that was a great question.
No, it was an awesome question. But I mean, so here's my kind of 2 cents boiled down into 2 or 3 sentences, which would be, if you work for a Microsoft Gold partner, do what's required to get that status.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But if you're just kind of, on your own, and you're an organization that either doesn't have this, or has thousands of employees, and they don't have to worry about that.
Right.
Because over 1,000, somebody would, there'll be enough people to meet that requirement. Mm-hmm. I would say for educational purposes, I prefer the EdX for 2 reasons. One, it's asynchronous. Right. I can do it. I can pull out the app on my phone if I'm waiting in line at the supermarket. I can listen to the content while I'm driving. I could do it after my kids go to bed. I can do it, if I get up real early in the morning and work out, and watch it on an iPad, which I've done.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
all of the above. You've done,
all of the above. So it's more flexible, and I don't have to block out a series of time when the phone is off and all that and stuff.
Right.
So I think from that point of view, it's good. It's also more approachable in the sense that it's just a module, right?
Yes.
As opposed to kind of like, this. And it's also interesting is the test that I did take, and I forget the number. I think it was 90-473 or 475. It's just sad. I don't know the name, but I know the number. But they said the best way to prepare this is take these 3 edX classes, which happened to be part of the data engineering track, which 2 of them I'd already taken, and this one I hadn't. So I think it may not, the future may not be either or. It may be yes and.
Well, I'd like to see them do that. I think that would, of course, part of the reason I'd like to see them is just pure selfishness, right?
Right.
I'd like to have some progress towards upping my partner status for my company. By the way, I just searched for 90-475 using a popular search engine. It brought up calculator and told me -385.
This is why we can't let the algorithms run everything. Which is actually, I know you have a thought left, but that actually is a good segue into our second question.
It is. No, it's good. I finally found it. 90-475 exam Microsoft takes me to 7475.
I'm sorry, that was 70.
That's it. Yeah. Designing and implementing a big data, I guess, solution. I can't see it until
with Azure Data Factory or something like that. Yeah. That's what it was.
Okay.
Yeah.
$165.
Which is actually lower than list price.
I know. It's got an asterisk beside it.
Yeah.
Interesting. Very interesting. Okay. So our next question.
Right. Our next question comes from Bob, who I believe lives in the UK. So that's why we didn't say his last name. Just a little GDPR humor for you.
Sorry. Yes.
No, just kidding. Basically, his question is that with all the AI testing that's going on, with all the and let me rephrase that, with all the AI implementations going on, how do you know when it's wrong? Like, what's the story with data quality? What's the story with testing it out to make sure it's accurate? And he points out that in traditional kind of old school systems like enterprise accounting, programmers would test it. They would do their own unit testing, and then they would hand it on to basically a series of Q&A or QA, not Q&A, QA testers. And then they would go through and make sure that a system was well tested. But with things like artificial intelligence and neural networks, how do you test them? Right? Because one of the things about neural networks is you don't really know what's going on inside them.
Can't you really only know AI? Can't you get an AI to test it for you?
Oh, there you go. That's very meta. But what we're seeing now is that data scientists or data science departments are handing their trained algorithms straight to the users, and they're being deployed. And he sent an article of basically that criminal mugshots where they do facial recognition
Mhm.
uh, erroneously flagged a number of members of Congress. I think 28 was the number.
See, I'm not so sure that was an error.
Yeah, I think in our private message you said, "Are you really sure that this was a false positive?" Um, I'm just going to leave
I'm
that
just,
there
I'm just saying.
because you can't really say much more than that. It's like, I wonder. But I think this really speaks to the importance of ethics in AI.
Agreed.
And that's interesting is that one of the courses they've added recently was ethics and law in AI to the AI stack,
Mhm.
AI certification on edX. And as well, I think they backfilled it into the data scientist one. Because
Yeah.
as if you're talking about who's going to pay their cell phone bill on time, that doesn't matter, right? I mean, it
Right.
obviously it matters if you're the telephone company, but in the scheme of like life and death, it's not really. If you mistakenly flag someone, it's not. No one's going to die from that. But if you
Right.
start allocating, law enforcement resources based on data that may or may not be biased,
Right.
or medical tests uh, results, then people's lives are on the line, and it starts to become more of a serious ethical issue.
Well, what's interesting in this conversation, in the timing of this, and totally disconnected, um, only through being friends with me. You're friends with me, and um, another friend who I hope to get on the show. He's done a lot of really interesting work. I'm not going to say his name, but we want to get him on the show probably twice because he's working on some really cool stuff. He put a tweet out um, earlier today. He said data science, machine learning, artificial intelligence, and related technologies are now facing a day of reckoning, and it's time for us to take some responsibility for our creations. And it was a quote from the O'Reilly.com website, and I reposted it. And Buck Woody, who has been a guest on the show before, um, actually replied to that and said, indeed, actually teaching a class on AI today, and I always start with ethics. And he provided the link aka.ms/AI-ethics. We'll put that in the
Interesting.
show notes for sure. But the you're right. I mean, it's it's not that the machines. It's certainly not that the machines are malicious. We get that. I mean, that makes for a great Hollywood plot. I
At
understand
least
that.
not yet. The machines are not malicious yet. No, just kidding.
Well, okay, that's fair. But they are. We've already seen chatbots get co-opted by
Right.
being fed, by being fed a stream, and what they're trained on in the 80-20 tests that they're or 70-30 tests they're trained on, they are, they're trained on a big chunk of the data, and then they're handed another chunk to be tested with. And this goes right back to Bob's question. This is the way we typically we call it training the AI, but it really is a form of unit testing where we're looking to see, what are the false positives, and the chaos matrix that comes out of that. Those can be tested to see, what are our false positives, what are our true positives, what are our false negatives, what are our true negatives, and you can do the math on that and determine, is this good enough? And you know this, Frank. I know this. At the end of the day, it's a percentage of rightness that we're looking for. That the percentage is never 100.
Right.
It's and for some the answer is 60 plus. For others, the answer is 70, 80, maybe a few for 90. But you and I both know this. It's hard to get 90%
Well, the other thing too is
agreement.
anything above 90%, I start to get suspicious that the model's
It
not
is.
overfitted.
It's a flag. Yeah,
Right.
exactly. I was just yeah. So it's an error. It fails the test if it's that good.
Right.
So
And for those of
Bob
you
asked,
confused about the term overfitting, we'll probably do a deep dive on that
we
at
need
some future
to,
date.
and
Yeah.
we'll put a link to some articles in the show notes about that. It is an interesting problem that
Right.
I
If
had
your
never
model can
heard
be
of.
too good to be trustable.
Yeah,
Which
I'd never
which
heard of this.
right. So here's a quick thing that I gave an example I gave to the high school students yesterday, and it's short, I swear. which is like my famous last words. So if you create a model that's 100% accurate, one of two things have happened. You either created an overfitted model that won't really be good against real data in production, or you've created a model that takes into account all of the entropy in the universe, and you've discovered it first. At which point you should stop what you're doing and start a hedge fund and invite Andy and me for a spin on your yacht and or private jet.
Because we, with this show, helped inspire you.
There you go. And we're not asking for money. We're just asking for a joyride.
That's it.
So one of those two things has happened. One's more likely than the other, and I'll let our listeners figure out which that is.
Occam's razor, brother.
There you go.
Yes.
I always wondered, did Occam have a beard, or was he clean shaven?
That is an excellent point. What was he doing with his razor?
We don't want to know.
Yeah, we'll. So, no, Bob asked a really good question, and my answer to that, I just saw it just a couple hours ago. Read through that, actually less than an hour ago. I was reading through it, and my thinking is it was twofold. One, that's a really good question. Second, I don't know. I don't know the answer to this. I don't know. You know, it's like just like overfitting is a problem I didn't run into until I started fooling around with, with statistics and data science. I hadn't thought about data science in the context of testing. Now, I have thought about data engineering and testing. I've written about it. If you go to your favorite search engine and type in ETL instrumentation, I own that topic.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm like 5 of the first 10. Okay. And it's old, and I never finished the series. I actually wrote 6 articles. I only published 4. I need to finish that. I need to update it and finish it. But testing ETL or data engineering, that's not hard. Testing data science, it's like you're asking, are these statistics accurate? And while we all want the answer to that question to be yes, Bob's question is, how do you know?
Right. You don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
I would suspect, and I think there's going to be parallels drawn to the software industry. Software testing was not really a thing when it first came out. You built it. Did it work? Yes, it worked. The bugs fixing cycle. This is way before DevOps was a gleam in anyone's eye.
True.
And I really think that we're going to see this kind of evolve as time goes along, because I think there's such a rush to get to market. So I responded to him via email about something else he asked. Was basically, this is taken as seriously as IoT, as security is taken in IoT and consumer devices right now, right? Because it's just the rush to market.
Right.
And he wrote back with touche. So
yeah,
which I think
Bob's smart.
Bob is a smart guy. Well, obviously he listens to us. So
well, there you go.
But I mean, it's just one of those things where I think this is going to evolve, and I think there's the elephant in the room is the notion of bias in data, and I didn't really buy into this until I kind of thought about it. And I think that, and there's a couple problems with this, and this probably warrants its own deep dive too. I came to the conclusion that all data sets have bias in them.
Oh, yeah.
And the problem in part is due to the word bias, because you talk to a statistician, bias means something different to them than it does on the news, right? Bias, at least in colloquial use, is that the right word? In common use, is implies some kind of malicious forethought.
That's true, right?
But I think bias in terms of, because I was speaking at a thing, and it was a bunch of statisticians there, and they're like, "Well, when you say bias, what do you mean? Do you mean statistical bias, or do you mean cultural bias or psychological bias?" Right. And I was like, "Well, somewhere in the middle." And the example I gave is, if I own a lemonade stand and I collected data on everyone who buys lemonade from me, from my neighborhood. Do I have an accurate picture of the neighborhood? Probably not. I only have a
Yeah.
picture of people who bought lemonade from me, right? So I don't know who the diabetics are, right?
Right.
I don't know who the people, I don't know, can you be allergic to lemonade? I don't know the
Yes.
people. Let's pretend I put gluten in my lemonade. Um, I don't have data on people I don't serve,
Right.
right? That's kind of a Captain Obvious statement, which in this example is not really a big deal, right? But let's think
Right.
about law enforcement. Law enforcement only has data on people who interact with law enforcement,
Right.
you know? And let's think, do we really want to live in a society where law enforcement collects data on everybody? The answer to that is no.
No, we do not. But we may be, in fact,
Well, that's a
living
whole
in that
other,
society.
that
That's
warrants its
another
own show.
show. Yeah.
So we're
But
pretty good on the content front there, Andy.
we are. We need to do more. We could do like a show a day for the rest of August,
Yeah,
just on the
seriously.
stuff we brought up. But here's what I
Seriously.
would say. No, sir. But here's what I'm thinking, Frank, about that. There when you think about software testing, let's step back to those days. What you talked about, the evolution of software testing, um, reminded me briefly of a T-shirt Christy made for me. It's a saying of mine, and it says all software is tested, some intentionally.
I think I've seen that shirt. Yeah.
Yeah, I've got banners I put out on social media. I don't think I've done it recently, but I should. Maybe we'll stick that on. I'll send you a copy of that. We put it on this show when we get it up there. But it's true, and the customers were actually testing the software back then, and they were
Right.
filing bugs, and then we have bugs to do it. And that cycle to some extent is still available today. But you're right. This whole thing that grew into what we now consider software testing did not exist when you and I started writing code.
Right.
And and so and when it came to exist, this is my first point, is when it came to exist, it really didn't look anything like what we anticipated.
No.
As a software developer, testing is this really alien thing. And I'm not trying to pick on software developers. And I know there are developers out there who can do testing. I know that they exist. And I can do it a little bit. Um, but even for, I have to put time between when I'm developing and when I'm testing. And for me, it's days. I have to not develop software for days
Right.
and then test that software because it is a completely alien mindset to software
Well,
development.
it's like running on gasoline versus diesel, right? It's just completely
It
different
really
parts of your
is.
brain
There's
that
a
you have
funny
to engage.
T-shirt I saw about it. I can't do it justice. I'll try to find the image, and maybe we'll put that on here too. But it was about software testing, and it says, it started with something like a user walks into a bar and orders one beer, and the user walks into the bar and orders two beers. The user walks into the bar and orders a million beers. The user walks into a bar and orders Z asterisk begin paren beers. You know, and it goes on like that. Null is one of the response. Orders null beers, and it goes on and on. And it's funny is that that's it's a beautiful T-shirt, but that's how foreign it is. It's so far out of the box there is no box. So
Well, and that's kind of the point because
well, it is. It has to be. But what is that now? Now, what does that look like? So, we're thinking. You and I are thinking early '80s, right? Developing software,
right.
and then software testing shows up, and it really becomes a thing. I want to say in the late '90s.
Yeah.
Then it's this new foreign thing. All right, we're in the early '80s of data science.
Yeah.
So, what is this thing going to look like in the 2020s or whenever it hits? Or maybe early 2030. What's that testing thing? I think it's going to be completely foreign. I was only half joking about an AI doing it. That was only a half joke, Frank. I imagine that could be automated, but I don't know. I don't know what that looks like, but I think it's going to be something so different and
Right.
so out there for it. But you are absolutely right, though. It has to be whatever they come up with has to be right. It's almost it's almost going to have that Hall of Mirrors thing going. I think you're going to have to test the testing. Does that
Well,
make
who
sense?
watches the watchers, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Right. How do you do that? So I don't know. I don't know the answer to Bob's question. I think it's a phenomenal question, and I'm glad he asked. I wish I had an answer. I think it's a good one of the. It's one of those things I'll noodle on when I wake up in the middle of the night. I can tell
Right,
you that.
right. No, it's a good question, and I think that as AI becomes, I think it probably wasn't a coincidence though that software testing became a thing in the
Yeah.
90s when software became more and more of a consumer facing, uh, kind of controls a lot more of our day to day life. Probably not a coincidence, and I suspect the same for AI too. It may not take as long because AI
Yeah.
is already impacting our lives.
Uh-huh.
So I don't know. I mean, it's somewhere that because I think most data scientist people are going to come from with their headspace in the stats world, where we're like, well, bias means X, Y, Z to me.
Right.
Of course, we tested it because of the 80-20, 70-30 split.
Right. Right.
But there's testing and then there's testing.
Yeah. And it's like, does any of that see part of the inherent stuff that you reminded me of? I was just talking about the T-shirt, the Z asterisk begin paren beers. Um, you know, that's that's stuff you take out in the data engineering step.
Right.
Right? That's a cleansing. You have to get that out of there. So, again, I don't know. I'm not saying that we need to put that back and then have the data science engines, account for that, the analytics engines. But it creates a different spot, and maybe some of the testing, maybe a lot of the testing, then occurs in the cleansing. But that's a different type of testing. Data quality testing. I've been preaching about data warehouse quality forever, Frank, um, because it's a surprisingly high number, the quality of the data warehouse, the data in the data warehouse. It's a surprisingly high number when that data is useless. I mean, for predictive analytics, it's north of 99%. You know,
Wow.
think about it. When you start doing the projections on stuff like that, think about what that looks like. It's a line, it's a curve usually, and you get the wrong curve off a half a degree at the beginning, and then you exponentiate, or worse, throw a geometric progression on that. You are way, way off in the future.
Oh, that's
Okay.
true.
It's
Very
it's
true.
that kind of thing. We're not dealing with straight lines here. That's just not the way the world works. So, the data quality and what does data quality look like in a data warehouse? It can be the dumbest things, Frank. It can be counts. And if you have duplicates in there where you're counting the same thing twice, if you've got nulls in there, maybe you're missing something. It's maybe the null is valid in that field, but you're not counting it because the value is null.
Or what if it says the 4-letter string of null rather than actually be a null value?
Oh, that happened to me. Somebody did that once. Anyway, yes.
Well, there's actually a story. We'll put this in the show notes about some lady whose last name is Null,
Oh, that's just wrong.
and she can't book flight. I mean, there's a whole list of things that she can't do.
I
It's
had not
very,
heard that story.
yeah, it's crazy. I mean, but it's just like I think the bottom line to answer Bob's question is that we're still early in the game, and
Yeah,
like you said, we're in the early '80s. Will this go
yeah.
faster because we kind of done this before? I don't know.
I don't know either. It'll be interesting to see. I'm glad that I'm glad Bob's thinking about it because, like I said, he's obviously intelligent. Um, it's somebody's going to have to think about that, and figure that out.
Right. I don't know, man. Maybe it could be Bob. Maybe Bob could be the next Mark Zuckerberg.
Maybe is that a compliment?
As soon as I said his name came off my lips, I was like, why don't we say Steve Jobs?
Uh,
Although
he could be.
arguably, maybe that's not. Maybe I should just stop
Yeah,
talking.
Everybody has strengths and weaknesses. We could say it that way, I guess.
There you go.
There, we'll be
So
fair as we can be.
speaking of interesting people, Richard Branson, the founder of the Virgin Group, and known for kind of his big publicity stunts, has a new audiobook out that I've listened to on Audible.
Now, does he read this book?
He does. No, it's not him, unfortunately, but it's another British guy. But I think if he read it, it would be very interesting because he's quite the character. I don't always kind of agree with what he says or does, but he is at least creative. I'll give him that.
Yeah.
And I wonder if he's involved in the data space. I know he's got like probably about half a dozen businesses.
Yeah, big businesses too.
Big businesses, but it's interesting how close to the edge of failing a lot of his businesses were at various points.
Oh, wow.
And like you can see, like, he's definitely a very adrenaline driven person, that's for sure. But he's pulled himself out of the fire almost every time. So it's like, wow. He's an interesting guy, that's for sure.
Sounds interesting. So, there's books out there like, books about people, biographies, autobiographies, books kind of about like Richard Branson telling the story of his businesses. There's classics and all of that by Audible. I actually saw a commercial for Audible on television.
Really?
And I watch so little television. It's odd that I would, first off, I would see any commercials, but I saw this. I think I was watching Shark Week. I confess, I watched Shark Week, some of it on Discovery Channel, and I enjoyed it. I'll say I enjoyed some of it. It wasn't the best Shark Week I've ever seen, but I believe it was a commercial on Shark Week for Audible, and I had not seen one on television before. But Audible is a sponsor of our podcast here of Data Driven. And Frank, do you remember the URL that our listeners can go to that they can score a free book, a free Audible download, and listen to an audiobook rather than having to, carry a book or a reader around with them? They can actually listen to somebody read a book.
Yes, so that would be thedatadrivenbook.com, where they'll hook our listeners up. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and they get I think it's a free 30-day starter subscription, and they get a free book with that. And yeah, it's great. I'm signed up. We do this. I forget what we pay each month, but we're not the low level because my older son started listening to a bunch of books, and he's really gotten into that the past 6 months or so. Stevie Ray, he likes the Joe Ledger series of books, which is kind of like, I don't know how to describe Joe Ledger. I read one of the books on my Kindle and enjoyed it. And I'm trying to remember the author's name. Now I got to look it up. You're going to hear.
So while you're looking it up, I will point out that if you do say sign up as an Audible subscriber, then we get a commission, so that helps support the show and enrich your mind. Because there's there's books on topics all over the place. There's even a data science book or two in audiobook format.
There is one of the books that got us in. By the way, Jonathan Mayberry is the name of the author of the Joe Ledger series. And if these don't become like a movie or a TV or something, I don't know what will. But great series of books, very interesting, very kind of like techno military, if you will.
Interesting.
Yep. So the Unicorns Among Us book, Frank, you turned me on to that early on. That's about a 2-hour listen. I want to say it's about a 100-page book.
Yeah.
I listened to it, and it was really good. Actually, that's one I listened to and was so inspired by it. I wanted to be able to search, so I bought the Kindle version. That's what's nice about electronic books. You can search.
Right.
But yeah, great book. I've actually used quotes from that in just about every presentation since then, Frank. So dozens of presentations have included quotes from Unicorns Among Us. Lars Nielsen, but I listened to that first on Audible. It's a great listen. Like I said, a couple hours. You got a road trip coming up? Got like 1 hour there, 1 hour back?
Yeah, I just like it for my commute because it just helps me turn that dead time into something useful.
Doesn't it? Yeah, I totally agree.
All right, so with that, let's let the nice British lady end the show.
Thanks for listening to Data Driven. Don't just listen, become a data driver by going to datadriven.tv to sign up to join the community, access to special events, tips and tricks, and more. Sign up today at datadriven.tv.